Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
Indie Alaska is a groundbreaking series that dives into the lives of people living in the last frontier. Each episode introduces you to colorful characters from around the state. Funding for Indie Alaska is provided in part by Alyeska Pipeline Service Company. Catch the latest episodes at alaskapublic.org.
The National Weather Service.
Hello again, everyone, and thanks for joining us for this Sunday's show. On the warning advisory map here, we've got a winter weather advisories here for the lower Yukon Valley and the lower Koyukuk and mid-Yukon Valley for tonight, and that's for wintry mix of precipitation in the form of snow, freezing rain, or just rain in some areas there. Anywhere from 1 to 2 inches of snow expected in these areas. And again, that's from 6 p.m. tonight to 6 a.m. tomorrow morning. And satellite imagery of the Western Pacific, a couple of systems stand out quite vividly here. One south of Kamchatka Peninsula and the other one that's spun up south of the Alaska Peninsula. And this front, pretty strong front here with a lot of tropical moisture in it, that's going to rotate up across the western Aleutians tonight and tomorrow morning with some pretty heavy wind and rain associated with it. Off to the east, some clouds exiting the southeast coast today with pretty good conditions and sunshine right up along the North Gulf Coast into the eastern interior all the way up to the upper Yukon Valley. A lot of cirrus coming in over the midsection of the state, and that extended down with dim sunshine down across south central Alaska today. And then the moisture here, this cloudiness here, mostly mid and high level clouds, main rain producing area down to the south across eastern Aleutians and the Alaska Peninsula. And the head of this front, especially in this portion of the cloud band there, that's where the strongest winds occurred there across the eastern Aleutians, with Unalaska getting gusts of 55 miles per hour and Nikolsky seeing gusts up to 68 miles per hour out of the north. And looking on the chart today, you can see the tight pressure field across the peninsula there and into the eastern Aleutians, with the front still down to the south. Otherwise, high pressure and the clearing skies over the eastern interior, and that pretty good condition all the way down the Panhandle today. Dry day today, should be another dry one tomorrow. Otherwise, up to the northwest here, there was some areas of light snow from the Koyukuk Valley westward to the northwest, or to Kotzebue Sound out into the Chukchi Sea, and along the western and, well, almost to the central Arctic coast, some patchy fog and flurries there, but a little more continuous snow back down towards Cape Lisburne and Point Hope and into Kotzebue, and some scattered showers there over the eastern Norton Sound area, the Nulato Hills, and the rain down here to the south, up into the southeastern Bering Sea to a certain extent, but dry day over the Pribilofs, but the rain here across the eastern Aleutians and Alaska Peninsula, and a breakout here under high pressure, and then the next storm system there to the southwest, and this tight gradient again. Everything's going to kind of rotate up to the northeast for tonight. It looks something like this. Pretty good front, so probably some storm force winds come into the western Aleutians with rain spreading over to about Kamchatka. It stays dry with less wind over the central Aleutian areas. Windy, wet conditions here continue with storm warnings tonight from Sitkinak all the way over to Cape Sarachev on the Pacific side of the Alaska Peninsula. Pretty windy though into Bristol Bay, but just a few scattered showers here over Kamishak Bay and over the Kilbook Mountains. And then this trough should develop some rain northward here into the Pribilofs and into the southwest coast. And again, becoming a mixed condition here over the lower Yukon valley areas and into the northern delta, but staying fair here with variable clouds and some areas seeing clear skies over the eastern interior down to the North Gulf Coast. And stays nice here with light winds across the panhandle. And then we've got this trough up here bringing some light snow to possibly the eastern Arctic coast, across the north slope and down in toward Kotzebue and Kivalina. Snow showers possible there for the St. Lawrence Island area. That continues into tomorrow there from St. Lawrence Island into the Bering Strait. Snow showers up over the northwest interior. And this band of moisture kind of rotates westward a little bit there. Rain and snow here over the Yukon Delta, Norton Sound, mostly rain down toward Bethel and then out into the Bering Sea. Gale force winds and rain there for Kodiak Island tomorrow, but fair, partly sunny skies here over south central Alaska and the interior after patchy areas of morning fog. It stays quite nice here over the panhandle with generally light wind conditions and partly to mostly sunny skies right up into the Copper River Basin and the eastern interior again. Scattered snow showers up here over the northeast, but nothing that's going to amount to very much. And scattered showers out here the eastern Aleutians into the Bering Sea. And then strongest winds in the morning, diminishing in the afternoon here for the western and west central Aleutian areas, but periods of rain continuing throughout the day. And the outlook for Monday, this front pushes eastward, rain spreading in the Queen Charlotte Islands and in close to Prince of Wales Island there, but small craft advisories as the gradient tightens up, and that'll produce small craft advisories, southeast winds 30 knots along the entire coast on Tuesday, and also small craft advisories developing in Clarence Strait. Otherwise, gale force winds continue there for Kodiak Island into the Barrens with periods of rain, possibly heavy at times, rainy and windy conditions across the southwest interior, mixing with snow over the Yukon Delta, and a chance of some showers in along the Kuskokwim Valley. We still have an area of light snow here covering much of the North Slope and the Brooks Range, central and eastern Brooks Range. Some of that could get down into the northern Koyukuk Valley to about Bettles. Snow showers off to the northwest, Kotzebue Sound. And pretty good northeast winds here from St. Lawrence Island and areas north of Nunivak Island. Gale force here heading southwestward across the Bering Sea. Lighter winds south of this front for the Alaska Peninsula, eastern Aleutians, and the Pribilofs. Definitely much lighter wind conditions. And for temperatures today, mid-40s to lower 50s here along the southeast coast, with again a net at 54 degrees, as was Stewart, 50 degrees in Sitka, 45 in Juneau. Couple of 48s there at Elfin Cove and Yakutat, 50 degrees in Cordova with some sunshine, 45 in Seward. Valdez not bad at 48, lower to mid 40s here, Cook Inlet and into the Susitna Valley. Same thing for the Copper River Basin. Northway right at the freeze point, Delta up to 39, Fairbanks 35 degrees. Cooler out to the west at Tanana 31, Bettles had 27. 25 this afternoon at Fort Yukon, and lower 30s here out over the west from the Kobuk Valley out to the northwest coast, and actually the western Arctic coast, all of the Arctic coast in the teens to lower 20s. And off to the southwest, lower 40s for the Pribilofs, mid 40s here for all of the Aleutians, and then mid to upper 40s here for the Alaska Peninsula. But King Salmon reached 50 this afternoon, Kodiak at 47. Looking at the lows for tonight, 30s here for the Panhandle to lower 40s in the south, and mostly in the upper 20s to mid 30s here for south central Alaska. Teens and 20s here where the skies are clearest over the eastern interior and up into the Arctic coast where 8 degrees the forecast low both at Arctic Village and Deadhorse. Teens for the remainder of the area. 20s to near 30 up over the northwest, mostly in the 30s here, but pretty mild for the Alaska Peninsula. Mid to upper 40s with that wind and rain. And for the highs for tomorrow, upper 40s to lower 50s for the peninsula and Bristol Bay. Coolest here in the north, teens and 20s again, north slope in the Arctic coast. 40s over south central Alaska, mid 40s to upper or lower 50s there for the Panhandle, and upper 20s to mid 30s over Kotzebue Sound and the Selawik Valley. For flying weather, VFR for the Panhandle, the North Gulf Coast, central eastern interior, and then back all the way to the west there. But some IFR through this area where the moisture is, and we have those winter weather advisories, and then IFR spreading up to Kodiak Islands with the lowest conditions there on the east side, but IFR back across the Alaska Peninsula, eastern Aleutians up to the Pribilofs, and IFR mostly off the coast there, just kind of grazing the Barrow area, but marginal VFR in the forecast there for the eastern Arctic coast. And moving on to passes, Anatuvik, marginal becoming VFR. Same forecast for Adigan, Lake Clark and Merrill, VFR, rainy, open, windy VFR, Isabel VFR, Mentasta, also VFR, And Tanita looking good. Portage, VFR. Chilkoot and White, same forecast, VFR tomorrow. And the freezing level's 2,000 feet here from Norton Sound across the upper Tanana Valley, gradually lifting up to about 6,000 feet from the North Gulf Coast, and then kind of plunging a little bit to the south there, 4,000 feet back down into the central Aleutians. Icing threats here, that front coming northward, could be some areas of occasional widespread moderate reaching southern Kodiak Island, and also along the Alaska Peninsula with a chance of rime icing here over the southeast Bering Sea and eastern Aleutians, and then some working in toward the western Aleutians as well. Winds aloft shows that intense low we had south of the Alaska Peninsula really developed some pretty strong ridging right up along the eastern Pacific into south central or across southern Alaska, but a pretty good jet coming over the top of that ridge at about 100 knots through the interior, and 9,000 foot winds showing pretty strong winds here, or pretty strong speeds, 35 to 50 knots, mostly across Sitkinak down in toward the Alaska Peninsula, and much lighter, more southerly winds in over interior Alaska and the Panhandle, kind of easterlies of 15 over the southern areas, and then anywhere from 30 to 50 knot winds out over the western Aleutians toward the Komodorskis. 3,000 feet, showing much the same pattern here. Strongest winds about 50 knots toward Shemya, but lighter into the central Aleutians and eastern Aleutians. Not too bad. Northeasterlies at about 30 to 35 knots across Bristol Bay. 40 to 50 knot winds coming in across Kodiak Island, even some 30 knot winds here over the southern western Alaska Range area, but quite light up over the interior and not too bad on the Arctic coast. Turbulence-wise, pretty smooth through much of interior Alaska and the Panhandle, but look for occasional moderate chop here, Kodiak Island into Bristol Bay, the Alaska Peninsula. Some of that working up toward the southern Kenai Peninsula areas, and then kind of in that wind across the Bering Sea, and moderate turbulence expected out toward Shemya. And after the break, I'll be back with a look at the marine forecasts.
Everyone thinks it's going to happen to somebody else.
It's not the money part, it's all the little things that you can't replace. All the kids' projects were destroyed.
They started cleaning out the debris, and in the bottom of the debris was a baby.
Alaska ranks in the top 10 in the nation in number of fire deaths per capita. Every facility we build will have a fire within the next 10 years. The dollar loss is massive and replacement costs staggering. The threat of fire in the Arctic is greater than any place else in the United States. And Alaskan communities are less equipped than most to fight these fires after they have started because of no money, inadequately trained firefighters, lack of firefighting equipment, and sub-zero temperatures holding critical water captive in ice, disabling equipment and people in their efforts to put fire out. If a fire isn't put out within the first 15 minutes, it can't be stopped. When homes and buildings are destroyed, it leaves crippled communities. Loss of power plants, water plants, schools, hospitals, and health clinics are not only traumatic to the community, but in the harsh Arctic climate, life-threatening. And if a school burns down, it is not only loss of an educational facility, but also a community's meeting place and cultural center. What can we do about it? First, understand that fire is a community problem. It takes everyone working together to defeat it. The best weapon to fight it is to prevent it.
I've always believed in the simplicity of things.
Don't try to design something state-of-the-art type of structure. That will never work in the Arctic.
Often communities and professionals are not aware of requirements and built-in fire protection needs at the planning stage, and therefore not enough money is allocated to build safe buildings. Too often, planning does not involve the whole community, only the professionals, administrators, and officials. The communities who will use the building need to be involved. How they intend to use the building is important to the design and construction. Generations of life experience and knowledge gained from living in an area must be respected and listened to. All have valuable contributions to make in the planning because a community is being built, not just one building.
How are we going to be able to deal with snow removal on AKwx area? Okay.
There's a line here.
Even though a building is designed for a specific purpose, it belongs to the community in which it resides. It must be constructed according to well-planned standards so it doesn't violate zoning and building codes and endanger other buildings and human lives. Small communities deserve to be as safe as Alaska's larger cities.
When you build a building to code, you are getting the cheapest thing you can get away with.
Consult with your fire department. They are the one that's going to have to fight that fire when they get the fire call.
One of the reasons Alaska's fire record is so bad is that building codes recognize extreme cold but ignore the threat of fire. Yet isolated communities, poorly equipped to prevent fires, much less fight them, meet minimum fire and life safety codes. They are time bombs of hazardous fire conditions, ready to go off at any moment. Even these minimum codes are repeatedly violated when changes to plans are made during construction without regard to fire and life safety. Those who try to enforce building and safety codes should be supported by their communities. The cost of changing unsafe minimum standards to safe, adequate codes is as little as 2 to 5% of construction costs, a small price to pay. When the stakes become the safety of children and families, the game of trying to beat the code turns deadly. So enforce fire and safety codes. Encourage designs for mechanical and other building systems that make sense for subarctic conditions, that are designed to handle 24-hour operations at maximum capacities, and not so sophisticated that they are difficult to operate, are inappropriate, and require firefighting capabilities that are non-existent.
The alarm systems are so complex that nobody up here knows how to run them.
Buildings, like people, have lifespans with costs for maintenance and operations. And buildings in the Arctic endure a climate so harsh that mechanical systems and structures require more maintenance than moderate climates. So operation and maintenance need to be included in building costs, and people need to be trained to operate and repair the buildings. In the long run, you save money. Abused buildings can be injured and die just like people. Vandalism and people improperly trained in operating and taking care of buildings damages them. Like people, buildings thrive when communities are proud of them, but when neglected, become vulnerable to fire.
When my children are in school, most of the time I figure that they're safe.
Recognizing that fire can happen to your community is the first step in preventing fire. Make certain your buildings are protected. These are moral and legal responsibilities of leadership. Communities can and should hold their leadership accountable for their well-being.
Also ensure that the contractor, whoever it gets, doesn't take shortcuts.
There are communities which have recognized the importance of fire prevention and safety. They have built well and are prepared. Of course, it takes money, but the money spent on fire prevention is cheap insurance compared to the loss of millions of dollars, property, and emotional trauma. Money is poorly spent when there isn't enough to do the job right and safe.
If they hadn't stopped it there, it could have taken out the power plant, the water plant, the cafeteria for the elementary school.
They hold a lot of community activities in that school. They hold their Eskimo games during New Year's. They hold dances for them.
Part of the job of preventing fires is to identify the buildings in a community that are critical to the well-being of the people. This can be done with assistance from the Alaska Division of Emergency Services. These buildings can then be upgraded to conform to higher than minimum standards by separating buildings, separating heat sources from buildings, installing sprinkler systems that are appropriate for remote villages with limited water, using non-combustible building materials, and getting enough money to train and educate users of buildings on basic maintenance and fire prevention. Remind government leaders and local people that this is their community and it is within their power to prevent the disasters of fire. But it takes communication between the people and their government to prevent and combat fire. In Alaska, permanent communities are only a couple of generations old. Native Alaskans were nomadic, moving with the seasons to fish and game sites. Winter sites were chosen that protected the survival of small family groups during harsh winters. Many still starved and died. Just like today, it took tough, intelligent people using all the cleverness and skills they had to survive. Nothing was wasted. Lives and community were endangered if weapons, shelter, and tools were not taken care of. Today, society and government help when disasters strike, but the loss is never totally replaced. So the same care and skill is required to take care of buildings and equipment so that communities do not lose their lives and buildings to fire.
For the coast tomorrow, light southeast winds here with seas running 6 to 7 feet with the slightest seas up to the north. Light winds, northerlies 15 for northern Lynn Canal, north 10 for Stevens Passage, and light northwest breeze for Clarence Strait with slight seas. And for Tuesday, we've got small craft advisories here for the entire stretch of the coastline. Southeast winds become easterlies here for the north coast. North winds continue, but up to 20 knots there for Lynn Canal and Stevens Passage. And southeast winds up to 25 knots for Clarence Strait with 5-foot seas. And for Kodiak Island tomorrow, east winds 40 knots, northeast 45 for Shelikof Strait, and gales here for the Barren Islands into Kamishak Bay. Cook Inlet, south of the Forelands, northeast at 30 knots. Northern Cook Inlet looking at 20-knot winds. Light winds for Prince William Sound and easterlies at about 20 knots for the western Gulf Coast. And the gales continue here for the east side of Kodiak Island. You've got east 40 knots there for the Barren Islands, southeast 35 with 17-foot seas, and easterlies at 25 knots. So losing the gales for Shelikof Strait, but a gale force wind forecast for Kamishak Bay, and northeast still pretty brisk here for Cook Inlet, and even increasing a little over northern Cook Inlet. Gales here for the North Gulf Coast, and northeast at 20 for Prince William Sound. Northeasterlies 30 knots here from Bristol Bay down along the Alaska Peninsula. Gales in the forecast here south of the peninsula and over towards Sitkinak with 40-knot winds. And then small craft advisories for Bristol Bay, northeast 25, northeast 15 here for the Alaska Peninsula, and easterlies at 25 knots there southwest of Kodiak. And for the Aleutians, there's still a chance of some storm force winds coming in late tonight and early tomorrow morning here. But if you bet on gales, you can't miss out there. So definitely gale force winds over the western Aleutians. East to northeasterlies 20 to 30 knots in the central Aleutians, and small craft advisories for those northeast winds for the Fox Islands. And then for Tuesday, north 35 here just west of Adak, and then northeast 30 knots out to the west with 30 knot northerlies there across the central Aleutians, and east to southeast for the Fox Islands at 20 knots with 8 to 13 foot seas. For the southwest coast, northeast winds 20 to 30 knots there, 30 knot winds over the northern Bering Sea, and northeast 35 for the Pribilofs with 13 foot seas. That holds through Tuesday as well. Pretty brisk winds continue. In fact, we've got gales up across the entire northern Bering Sea and over to the southwest coast with 30 knot northerlies for St. Lawrence Island. On the Arctic coast, northwest breezes there on the east side, northeast breezes for the west side, Wales to Cape Thompson north at 20 knots. And then winds pick up in these areas, small craft advisories from Wales all the way up here along the western coast, lightest on the central coast, east 15, and then back into the small craft advisories for the eastern stretch of the coastline. And for tonight again, dry here for the North Gulf Coast and the Panhandle for a change, and also through the eastern interior. Wind and rain on the increase here for the Alaska Peninsula, or the rain, and also along this trough that angles back into where the winter weather advisories are in effect over the west central interior, and a band of snow up here to the north, and then that strong front brings some heavy wind and rain into the western Aleutians, and that'll continue into early tomorrow. Then the winds will diminish there. And looking at, again, the gusty winds and rain for Kodiak Island, and some precipitation along this trough here back on the west coast, but partly sunny, dry weather, light winds from the central interior all the way down the Panhandle. And then this front approaches the southeast coast here, and again brings those southeast winds up to small crafts, with gales continuing for Kodiak Island.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.